just like not very many people use Emacs. In college, I actually used Emacs, but it was just like I got sick of having to install it in every computer I wanted to use it on. So yeah, I just use Vim. I need to use it on servers anyway.
I do like that about Vim. I mean, I don't think after a little while it probably didn't matter much. Like, I just needed the basics of Vim when I'm on the server, but I really enjoyed the fact that I could get on a production server and just be like, oh, pretty much all the things I know and love are here.
Yeah, it's on Mac. It's everywhere. So it's just not Windows, obviously, but is that even an operating system?
Is it still an operating system? But I figured out like. No, but I mean, Emacs was written in 1976.
Yeah.
So.
Vi was written in 73, and Vim was written in like 89 or something.
I don't really know the difference.
Vim is Vi improved.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I don't know how it's improved. Because, like, if I type, well, I mean, I never really used Vim anyways. I use some of it very much.
Do you write Ruby in Emacs?
Yeah.
Cool.
Daniel Evans at Rocket Made is like really good at like Emacs and Ruby.
Yeah, he is.
Who is?
Daniel Evans down in St. George.
Oh, yeah.
He's fast.
Yeah, we always had like editor offs. Like I know.
And he always won?
No, I'm pretty good at Vim too. I mean, I'm pretty awesome at Vim, but like he was just as capable in Emacs.
Yeah.
Which is surprising because there's like far less resources, like out there. Like a decent amount of the Ruby community is using Vim, so you can just kind of like stop with like efforts and whatever.
It's just kind of, well, I mean, it's funny because with Emacs, it's like, that doesn't exist. Okay, well, 4 lines of list will make it exist.
Yeah.
And then we have macros too.
I actually wish that the way I could customize my editor would be in a Lisp, because I actually really like when I'm gonna write a plugin, I don't want it to be like stateful and imperative, and so.
I will admit Lisp is a better language than VimScript.
Yeah.
Well, it's cool because like I have a scratch, so like I can just start evaluating things right in my buffer. In fact, that's what happens when I start up Emacs. It goes to a base image and then it loads in my init and then my user, and then it just loads my scene, loads whatever. So like,
Yeah.
I mean, in a sense, I'm basically running. It's extremely stateful, but it's actually not. It's like the transformations are repeatable, and so repeatable that you can just select them.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Emacs users are cool, like Tibetan monks that can like boil their blood by thinking or something. But like, I still think I prefer Vim.
Okay, so Isaac, what were you gonna show?
I'll present on editing your templating engines for Rails generators.
Templating engines in Rails. Okay. Does anyone else know of like a project that they think would be fun to show for a few minutes? Okay, well, as we go through, if you think of anything, just keep it in the back of your mind because we'll probably have time at the end for lightning talks. But so let's see, Mike Moore wants to go basically last.
I don't care.
Isaac doesn't care. Garrett is not here, so he's going to go first. Actually, I'm just going to ask, would you rather go first or second? Do you want to get it over with?
Whatever.
Okay.
What it sounds like.
All right. Well, I'll let Garrett go first then. Before we get started with that, we'll just do our traditional quick stand-up around the room. So we're going to just go around and have everyone say your name, how much you love Ruby on a scale from 1 to Yukihiro Matsumoto. You can decide what that scale looks like and make a judgment call there. And then thirdly, some sort of random question. Let's say, also, how much you love Ruby. Which My Little Pony? Which television character? We're going to be a little more generic because I actually don't know the names of any of the ponies.
But that's not.
I've also just lost Mike Moore as a friend from having said that, but
That's not fair because like, out of all characters in the world, it's kind of hard to choose a My Little Pony But at the same
Animated
time, like,
characters, if we do cartoon
Okay,
characters,
so-
okay?
yeah, do that.
Any sort of animated character, you can pick one and say which one you are. So I'll go first. I'm Mike Reese. I, on a scale of 0 to Mats, I love Ruby 1 Rich Hickey's worth.
Can't do that.
And he's not here to stop me.
I can't imagine that's very much.
I think he would love Ruby a lot. I think so.
You don't think your video is a giant mess?
That it complex all the things? Probably so. Any case,
Such a small
Um,
scope of.
if I had to be an animated character, I would be Yoshi, because I mostly just eat stuff to gain my superpowers. So let's go this way. Isaac, you can kick it off.
Okay, so I'm Isaac Sloan, and I like Ruby like pretty much as much as you can like Ruby while still admitting that you occasionally need other languages. So yeah, and I don't want to think too much, so I'll just say Fluttershy.
Jake Oldham. I like Ruby. I'll go with Mats. As much as a newbie can like it, I guess. And I'll go with Darkwing Duck.
Ooh. I'm just gonna keep doing this every time
You
someone
just
picks something.
Click the microphone. Just kidding.
My name is Richie Priego. I like Ruby a lot. I don't know any other languages, so I don't know how to compare them. But I like being able to solve problems in different ways. There's not just one way to solve a problem. And favorite character would be Captain Falcon.
Oh man.
Ah, sorry.
Say it again.
It's gonna be the best if it totally messes it up. All right, Captain Falcon.
Alright, I'm James Googler. I just moved up from St. George. On the scale of Ruby, I thoroughly enjoy it more than old people like golf, possibly. Depending on the old people and how rainy the day is, I suppose. And character, Gyro from DuckTales.
Nice.
Phone deal.
I like it.
That's almost the same.
I love phone deals.
Nice.
So not. Which one is it?
That's
It's
not
that
what you
guy
meant.
with the suit of armor. Which one is it?
or
Gizmo?
or all the other ones.
Fair enough.
Okay, Neil.
I'm Neil Oler, and I have become a recent Ruby convert. So it's another language, but I see why people like it. And in school, we always laughed about Scrooge McDucking through our money when we were college graduates. So that's what we're currently doing. As a totally unrelated note, I'm currently unemployed and looking for a job. So.
This is a.
It's okay.
We used to ask
I'll talk to you
who here.
after.
Yeah, we used to ask who's recruiting, and we stopped asking because it was everyone every time. So, so this is a good person to look out for.
Yeah.
All right, wrap around Mike.
My name is Mike Moore. I like Ruby. I think I want to say a Jim Wyrick, but
Ooh.
it's probably more of an Aaron Patterson. So, I'm not sure how you measure that.
So you're like more into illegal street dancing. Well, down in Provo, you know, we're just not all into that, but.
See, the problem is that all cartoon characters is too broad.
I know.
I have a hard time narrowing it down.
It just has to be a good one.
Yeah, it doesn't have to
Well,
be.
is
It's
there
not
a
a superlative.
bad
No one, no
Yeah,
one is
there's
gonna,
some bad
no one is about to go through an exhaustive search of every animated character ever and go, oh, you should have picked that one.
I know, but I can't think of.
My
which
Little
one
Pony
the
is
most
just good
unique.
because it's polarizing. So like, I mean,
How about all
you chose it for like your
anthropomorphic
profile
pony
picture. You
type
might as well just choose it
cartoons?
now.
I could show what my character would be. That it's because it's never mind. I'll just-
Oh, yeah, you didn't share. What was yours?
Oh, he said Scrooge McDuck.
Oh, that's right. Well, you said.
Because I want to Scrooge McDuck through my money.
And I mean, I purposely didn't choose Rainbow Dash because I wanted to leave it open for you.
If I choose McDuck through my money, I'd hit my head on the rocks below it right now, though.
Right?
I think
I
like the
like
world's falling
Rainbow
apart.
Dash the most, but I'm not
Yeah.
really sure that
Same thing.
it chooses the most
Awesome.
representative of me. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like you don't have wings.
So intense and competitive that you know.
Boom.
It's fierce.
I just really loved your GitHub one though. Like I stole that for a while.
When you have.
Well, like the Rainbow Dash was like the GitHub octopus.
Oh yeah, that's actually good.
That's it really? Wait, what?
Yeah, it's
Yeah, they have their Okta deck of all their.
That was actually done by GitHub?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, Google Octadeck, and you'll see like they've got 100 of them. Different kind of things.
They have a great Admiral Grace Hopper octopus too. That one's pretty good.
That's awesome. I don't know which.
All right, we're going with Rainbow Dash. I've decided for you because you took too long. All right, wrap around back there.
Dave, I like Ruby more than English, and I'm Cartman.
Carmen.
I like that.
I'm a little bit afraid of doing this.
Super racist, I guess.
Carmen's like-
We're gonna just assume you meant this one specifically.
Yeah.
There you go. Maybe this one. All right, Holdy.
Alright, I'm Ryan Holdaway. I tend to love Ruby.
Ooh,
Don't go for that one.
hold on.
It just happened. What's happening?
What is your?
There's an underscore in there.
Why would you give that away? He was about to poach you on Twitter.
Whoa! All right,
And
character.
My pony is Applejack.
Kendir? Is that a thing? You know?
All right, Applejack.
Yeah.
Applejack is pretty good.
Yeah, she's my favorite one.
You know a Brandon Holdaway?
Boom.
Do I know a what?
A Brandon Holdaway?
Yeah, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
From St.
It's
George.
From St. George.
Yeah, I grew up with that kind of high school and such.
Oh yeah.
He lives in Logan right now?
Does he?
I think so.
That's a surprise.
Are you related to him?
Not related to me, no, but I do know that dude.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah, he's in Logan, I think. I lost track of him too, so I'm not sure.
All right.
I'm Garrett Thornburg. I like Ruby probably 4, 5, 6. I mean, I like it decently enough. It gets me paid. But I like a lot of other languages too, so I'm not going to be prejudiced or anything. An extremist. My favorite character is not animated, but basically it's John Ralphio from Parks and Rec.
He's like a cartoon.
Ralphio.
Gene Ralphio, basically.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's pretty great.
Any one of those will work.
Jay Shaw. Side note: one of my wife's good friends went to high school with the guy who plays John Ralphio, and she said he's basically like that in real life.
I mean,
Yeah.
how would you look
You
like
can't
that?
fake
Like,
that.
Yeah.
Not fakeable.
I'm assuming like when he came on set for the show, they're just like, yeah, this works. Let's do it.
I think most of the characters are actually similar to that in real life, because like in like Legend of Korra, like the Last Airbender, like crap, over like the intern girl with the black hair in the beginning, she does the voice of these twins in Legend of Korra, and like it's exactly like her. So
Yeah, it seems like they're all kind of typecasted.
Oh no.
And Chris Pratt in Guardians of the Galaxy too.
yeah, well they just awesome in there.
Well, and Nick Offerman in everything that he does is just that grumpy old man.
I love a grumpy old man. All right, so we're starting off with Garrett.
It's a trick. Find a job for yourself.
All right. So I guess I'm demoing some Clojure tonight. The code that I'm going to show you is it's a matching engine. So it's kind of like it's an order book matching engine. This is what's used to match stocks in the stock market or Bitcoin exchanges, how they have buyers and sellers and how they cross. So I want to just kind of go with, before we jump into Clojure, just kind of what we're going to see, because Clojure is just kind of cool. It's just one way of doing it. So I don't know if I'm supposed to be super excited or not about it, but
I'm just going to say Clojure. It was really fun writing this in Clojure, and it was kind of eye-opening. But so what is a matching engine? A matching engine just facilitates trades between buyers and sellers. Buyers and sellers represent their quantity and their price in the form of an order. So that's what order comes in an order book matching engine. And then there's many order types, and if you get into like high frequency trading or anything on the stock market, you'll hear about a million names for a million different orders. But it's effectively, it kind of breaks down to two major groups, which is a market and a limit order. A market order just says, I don't care what price it is, whatever people are buying and selling at right now, give it to me, I just want to get rid of what I have. And then a limit order is saying, actually no, I want to specify a price. And this code we're looking at only deals with limit orders. So you have to specify a price to what you want to buy or to what you want to sell. And you always specify a quantity. So the internals of a matching engine, it's basically two things. It's this order book that we're talking about, and it's just one for buyers that holds buyer orders and one that holds seller orders. And they're sorted differently. So a seller book, like what we call a buy book, right? Or let's say this: a buy book of buy orders are sorted high to low, and a sell order book is sorted low to high. And the idea is that we look at the top of the book, so we can basically say, hey, do these cross? Can we take the top of each one, and can we say, hey, do they match? Can we have this person sell to this person? And I don't know if there's any questions on that or not, but oh yeah, maybe.
Are there timeouts on the orders? Like, I'm
So-
willing to pay this price until this time?
So in the stock market, the real stock market that's only open for a certain amount of hours every day, as traditional market and limit order actually expire at the end of the day. But they have things called like a stop market and a stop limit order that go for 1 year unless they're filled or whatever. But when you get to things like Coinbase's Bitcoin exchange, they don't care how long your order's open, so everything's automatically indefinitely until you cancel. So just some things to think about. It's like, well, okay, so I know person A wants to buy for this price and person B wants to sell for a price that's higher than this person's willing to pay for, but this person is willing to sell 100 My Little Pony dolls, and this person this person wants to buy 100 My Little Pony dolls, this person wants to sell 50. What happens? Well, that's kind of hard to think about, right? Because, I mean, naturally we say, oh, you just buy 50 of them, but how do you represent that in code? And that gets a little tricky because we have an order, and so what happens is we actually generate a new order. We say, we create a trade, we create this companionship of two orders, a buyer and a seller, and out from that pops out what's left over from one side or the other. I mean, there's a bunch of other random things that you can think about, but in general, I think this is like the most primitive way of thinking about a matching engine. People will make it complicated, I should say, but it doesn't have to be. So let's jump into some Clojure. The idea is with an order book or an Clojure, if you want to create an object, or if in Ruby you want to create a class, you actually create an interface to describe the methods that you're creating. And Lisp syntax might be a little weird, but if you are interested in playing with Clojure, after like a day or two, the parentheses just fall away, and it feels like you're writing some other language. But the interface we're defining here, what this says is we're going to define some interface or some protocol called order book, and it has three methods on it: the ability to accept, look at the top of the order book, or to decrement by some quantity. And when we define an order book, we're going to implement the methods. And so we're going to say, if we accept an order, someone's saying, hey, here's an order I'd like you to place for me. We sort this by first the price that it's coming in at, right? So we can sort it from high to low or low to high, depending if it's a buy or sell. And then we say, okay, well, here's all the people willing to sell for $10. All right, get in line. And there's a line of people at that price. So we sort first by price, and then we sort by time, which is actually a natural way of sorting things with an array. We use state objects, which are called atoms. And if you've ever worked with like a database, which I'm assuming everyone in here has, or like a Postgres database where you have ACID transactions, you can actually guarantee that when I update something, it's going to update or it's not going to update at all. There's no partial involved. There's no messiness to it. And Clojure offers this kind of a data structure where you can keep things in here. So we actually modify it with custom methods to guarantee that no matter which thread is looking at it, we're guaranteed thread safe code. So we're going to append that order, whether it's high or low, and at a certain price. The top basically just says, given the state that we have in our order book, grab me the one that's on top, so we can just chain call first, last, first for it. Decrementing is a little weird. This is where we can basically say, I want to decrement whatever's on top of the book by a certain quantity number. And I mean, we can get into the code, but for time, I'll probably just have to leave it at that. Just the interesting thing is, again, if you want to say, hey, someone's willing to buy 1,000 shares at the top of the order or something, you need to be able to loop through the remaining quantity and kill a bunch of orders on the top of the book. And this takes us to the engine, which is where the magic happens. We've defined here a limit order, which we're going to say there's an account and associated with the order and some threshold, some quantity, and then a type, which is saying, hey, I'm buying or I'm selling. And then we can see this is what a trade will look like, which is there's a buyer, a seller, a price, and a quantity. And price and threshold are synonymous. It's probably a code smell for me to leave it like that. But down here we have a similar interface method where we can accept and subscribe. So we're saying I can submit a buy or sell order to the engine, and I can also subscribe to events, and so I can give it a callback. Not super idiomatic, but it works. When we actually define a method, a matching engine class, we're going to say it takes 3 parameters: the buy book, the sell book, and the callbacks. And so we can define this accept method by saying, when you accept an order, we're going to say, if you're selling something, we'll go to the other side and we'll say, hey, are there any orders, are there any buyers that can match this? And we'll get that book and we'll basically say, try to match them. And then whatever, if we can match, it'll generate a bunch of trades. Whatever is left over, we're going to put into our order book. And so as a hack, I kind of overrode the definition of like a new matching engine class to take default parameters. So we're actually inserting an order book and a sell book and callbacks. So the matching engine itself is, like the actual matching method is really, really small. You just find out if you take like the top of the book and then you figure out if you can actually trade by seeing if there is something there and you can afford it. And if you can, then find out how much you can actually buy, whatever's left over, and then decrement the top of the current top of the book and publish the events. What does this look like? It looks like this. So if we were to, down here, open up our REPL, we can actually run this main method, and we can see that we're going to create a brand new matching engine, and we know that comes with a set of default parameters for us. It's nice and clean. And we're going to say, hey, I want you to actually subscribe anything you get into the engine. I want you to subscribe with the print line method. So we're just going to print anything out to the terminal. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to say, hey, engine, accept this limit order. So we're saying A is going to pay $10.50 for 200 My Little Ponies. They're willing to buy that many. Another person, B, is willing to buy 100 My Little Ponies for $10.60. And then come along 2 people willing to sell My Little Pony dolls. One person's willing to sell 200 My Little Ponies for $10.40, and another person 100 My Little Ponies for $10.30. So inside the matching engine, we in this like little example, we can see there's 2 buy orders that come along, and so the first thing that happens is the way everything is ordered, I should say, is, remember, we're going buy is high to low, so even though we submitted $10.50, $10.60 takes precedence over that, and so when person C comes in and says, oh, I'm willing to sell for $10.40,
the first thing we get to is we sell to B for $10.60, right? So this is a partial order. So then the trade happens, we print that here, and then we're going to generate the rest of the order to sell 100 My Little Ponies at $10.40. And then we say, well, who else is willing to buy My Little Ponies for more than $10.40? And we say, oh, hey, A is still willing to buy 200 My Little Ponies. And so another trade is generated for 100. And now what's left over in the books is buyer A is willing to buy 100 My Little Ponies, and then there's no sellers until we introduce this last guy, seller D, who's willing to sell 100 My Little Ponies, and they cross-generate a last trade. Now the order books are empty, and everyone's happy. So that's kind of a little short example. It is actually pretty quick. What? I'll say install and quit. And in fact, Clojure, if you've ever, if anyone has ever used it, you'll find that even though it's a Lisp, it's running on the JVM. You might think, is it slow? Is it fast? And it's actually really fast, would be the surprise. So I wrote a little benchmark, which basically just says generate a random order and then shove it in as many times as you possibly can. I actually have 10 threads running and trying to inject orders into it all the time. And we can go ahead and run that and see what happens. So it's going to output trades per second and orders per second, except for the fact that it blew up. So I'm going to do I don't know what I was touching here. We'll see if that breaks it. Nope. Okay, here we go. Sorry. So trades per second and orders per second. We see that we're submitting, like when after it warms up, you can see we're submitting about 82,000 orders per second into the engine, and from the random numbers that we're creating, we're generating about 64,000 trades a second. I think that's a pretty cool micro benchmark for a piece of code that's like 110 lines, but basically mimicking what the stock market uses. And as my computer begins to take off, I realize I should probably quit it. But that's it. That's all I have to say with Clojure and the matching engine. Thanks.
So I'm kind of new to all this. Was that Ruby I was looking at? Was that Ruby code?
This?
Yeah.
No, that's Clojure.
Okay.
Different language.
Okay.
Different language.
I was like,
Doesn't look like
not look familiar.
Yeah, Ruby.
No, we're all hosed if that was Ruby.
Sorry.
Is that close to Prolog at all, or?
You can write a logic kind of way in it. There's a library called CoreLogic, which is allows you to do like logic programming. Datalog is a format. People like to use it for Clojure sometimes, but I don't know. Pretty much in general, it's whatever.
All right, so I forgot to mention this. I was going to mention this at the beginning. Pluralsight. So a little while ago, I made a Pluralsight video, and Pluralsight gave me these like 1 month free cards. So if anyone wants one, I'm just going to leave them up here. You guys can grab them afterwards. I was actually supposed to tell them in advance, and they were like, "Oh, if you ever want to, we'll like sponsor a meetup if you're going to go speak somewhere." But I failed to tell them in advance, and so instead we just got pizza. But maybe I'll tell them sometime in the future, and they'll buy some better food for us at another meetup. All right, so what I was going to show you guys tonight is a little SVG drawing program that I made that's running in Elixir. And you can use it to just draw various different SVGs. It creates basically a little way to represent an SVG as a data structure in Elixir, and it provides like macros, so you can create a macro and then repeat that, then use that macro many times to create lots of repeated shapes and stuff like that. And it was just a for fun thing, but it's on showoff.risty.com. But Richie's already seen that, and so Also, we were going to have a separate presentation tonight on Elixir, so I was going to stay away mostly from the Elixir stuff and just stay in SVG land. But the other talk canceled, so instead of SVGs, which are also awesome, and you can do funny things like make pandas that roll their eyes, or make Mario Land that runs extremely fast because it's all just doing compositing on the GPU. But instead of that talk, which is really visual and fun, I'm going to do something really non-visual and boring in Elixir. So my decision-making skills are questionable at the least. And in addition to that, I'm going to try to live code it, and I've only ever tried to do that once. So this might go terribly wrong. Let's find out. So I'll go.
For the rule that what can go wrong will go wrong.
So we'll walk through this. I'll try and be fast. So I'm going to time myself. If I go too long, well, if you guys get bored, just raise your hand and I'll stop talking. But also I'll time myself and not let myself go too long. So this is like, I'm not going to stop to talk much about Elixir as a language. I figure when you see it, you can kind of get an idea of whether or not you like it at all. But if there's anything that doesn't make sense in the code, or you're like, wait, is that working this way or that way? Feel free to stop me and ask a question, because I'm not going to stop myself. So we're going to create a new project. We're just going to say mix new bitmap, and it creates us a little project. This is a lot like saying bundler, gem, whatever, and it's going to create like a skeleton of a gem structure for you. So we're going to jump in there, and we can say mix test, and you can see it generated a test for us. And as you might be able to guess, the test that it generated is not very interesting because it has no idea what this project should do. So what this project is actually going to do is I wanted to implement a bitmap. And what a bitmap is, so I was reading this book called Programming Pearls, which is really cool. It's a bunch of anecdotal stories about programmers who had to solve a really difficult problem in some sort of context, and they had to come up with a creative solution to solve it. And so in this one story, a guy uses a bitmap, which is basically a way of saying, let's say you needed to store, in his story, he needed to store 1 million numbers, which is actually not that hard on today's hardware, but just assume it was like 1 trillion numbers or something like that, right? And so if you tried to store 1 trillion 64-bit numbers, you're going to need 64 trillion bits, or 64 trillion bits of memory in order to store those, right? And he didn't have that much space. He had like 1/64 that much space. And so what he ended up doing is saying, well, if I think about like some bits in a computer, right? And in Elixir, we can represent a binary number just using this like 0b whatever, and you can just do a string of zeros and ones, and it's just going to tell you what that number is. And so what he said is, well, what if I like thought about the numbers 1 through 10, like maybe if I had all possible numbers 1 through 10, I could represent that as a single set of bits by saying like, oh, let's say I had the number 10, but I didn't have the numbers 9 or 8, but I did have 7, didn't have 6, I had 5, 4, 3, didn't have 2 or 1. Then I could represent that whole series of like which numbers I didn't have. Each one would just be 1 bit in the set of my array, or in the set of my memory. And then I could represent that like as an integer that ends up being some other integer inside of my normal programming way of thinking about an integer. So that's what a bitmap is. And so so I thought, okay, let's, like, how hard would it be to implement this in a modern programming languages? He did it in C, which at the time, you know, in C you basically have raw access to memory. So he just said, make me an array of Booleans and make it this wide, and he just got that many bits in his main memory, right? So in Erlang and Elixir and Ruby and other languages like that, you can't just say, give me this memory. Like, you don't have raw access to memory. You have to do it in some sort of structure. But Erlang, like similar to Ruby, has this idea of flexibly sized numbers. So normally in Ruby, if you just say 8, that's going to be represented by a single integer in C land. But if you keep adding stuff to that and it gets really, really big and it's about to be too big to be stored in a 64-bit integer, Ruby will actually just allocate another 64 bits and it'll like spread the number across those 2 different integers that live in the world of C. And so so Erlang does the same thing. So I thought, okay, like what would this code look like? So let's say it stores some numbers, right? And the way I'm going to represent this is I'm basically going to say, oh, I want to create a bitmap. So I'm going to call bitmap.create. And then what I want to do is I want to update my bitmap to say, hey, I'm going to store a number in this bitmap, and the number I'm going to store is 8. And let's just do a quick sanity test. So then let's just say, assert that my bitmap is equal to the binary number where I stored the number 8, and I have not yet stored the numbers 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or 0. And I can try to run that test, and it fails because I haven't actually defined anything yet. So we're going to jump over to bitmap, and I'm going to say, first I'm going to define a create method, which for now I'm just going to initialize this thing to 0, and then I need to be able to store something in a bitmap. So I'm going to take in a bitmap and a number that should be stored in it, and I'm going to return a new bitmap. So in order to do this, I'm going to use a little helper method that's just built into Erlang called Bitwise. Yeah, it's sort of like, so there's a few different ones in Elixir. There's like use, require, and include, and they have slightly different semantics on, are you just including the method definitions, or are you including macros, and a few other things like that. It's kind of like how you treat the namespaces, sort of. But you can think of that just like a Ruby include. You're basically saying, like, I want to be able to use all the stuff that was defined over there. So by doing that, now what I can do is say, all right, I want to create some binary representation of the number that came in. So the way I'm going to do that is just take a 1, and I'm going to shift it over number of times. So let's just really quick, I'm just going to open up another terminal so you guys can see what that looks like. So for instance, if I said, hey, the number 3, what does that look like? Well, if I take 1 and shift it over 3 times, I get an 8, which is the same thing as saying 1 with 3 zeros after it. So in other words, I just took my 1 and I shifted it over 3 places. So that's all that Bitwise thing is doing. And then what I'm going to do is just say, then I just need to take my bitmap and do a binary OR against this binary number. So this is slightly weird, but we can run a test. Oh, I forget. Nope. One test, there you go. All right, so I always forget this because in Ruby you just say def, you don't say do. In Elixir, you always end everything with a do whenever you're creating some sort of a scope or a block. And so, yep, exactly, yeah. And so, anyway, some Elixir people love it, some Elixir people hate it. All right, but now this bitmap is not very interesting yet. So let's say it knows what it stored. And so now what we want to do is we want to create a bitmap. We want to update it by storing something in there. And let's just say we're going to store the number 5. And then I'm going to assert that bitmap.include, question mark, 5 should be true. And 1 should be false, right? So I can run that test, and bitmap include is not defined yet. So jump back to bitmap really quick here. We're going to say include question mark number bumper. I should have just stuck with it, man. Should have gone for it. So there are no classes or instances in Elixir. Elixir is functional, and so every one of these is a pure function. It just takes arguments and returns a result.
They're like a container, like just
yeah.
Basically you could think of them as all being classes.
Yeah. So the fact that you always say def module, you can kind of think of that like Ruby's def module, like or defining a module in Ruby where you can't have any state in there.
Yeah, for sure.
So. So then what we're going to do is say, if we take the bitmap that came in and we do a binary AND operation with this number and check if it's greater than or equal to 0. So again, let's jump into Shell real quick and kind of experiment with this. So what happens is, let's say I have some binary number like 0b10. If I AND that against the number 0, I get back out 2, which is the same thing as that. And so what this really ends up meaning is that if I ever take a number like...
You said and, you meant or.
Sorry, yeah, this was an OR operation. Yeah, you're right. So if I take a number like this and I OR it with a number like this, essentially what a binary OR does is it walks through the bits and says if either of these bits was high, then the new in the new number, that bit will be high. And if both of them were 0, then now that bit is 0. And so it's just, so this, using an OR, you can basically just say update that one bit inside this other big number. And so so that's all we're doing. And an AND does the same thing, except both of them have to be 1 in order for that 1 to stay there. Otherwise, it's going to go back to being a 0. So we can use this little trick to test to see whether or not a given bit was already 1 or not in this bitmap. So run our tests again. Now we have 2 tests working. And now we're going to try to get a little bit fancy right before I run out of time. We're going to say, it'd be really nice if what I could do here was, given a bitmap, I could like iterate through all the numbers in that bitmap, right? In the example problem that was originally stated that got me interested here, the programmer had to take in a list of phone numbers that was unordered, and he had to sort them in memory and then write them all back out to an ordered file on disk. And so when the new file came out, every number should be in the correct order. And that's the nice thing about a bitmap is that every bit, since it represents the next number, the next number, the next number, if you walk through it, you're always going to get the numbers back out in sorted order, right? It's just kind of a nice thing that falls out of this data structure. So let's say it can iterate in sorted order. And so the way I'm going to write this test here really quick, we're going to do a couple of shortcuts. So we're going to say bitmap.create, and we're going to use this little pipe operator to say whatever the return value of bitmap.create was, pass it in to this next function. So then we're going to say bitmap.store 84, and then we'll pipe the result of that and say bitmap.store 50, and then we'll bitmap.store 104. And so the first, I'm basically just carrying this bitmap through all of these different function calls. And this is just a fun little macro that we have. And then I'm going to say, let me assert that if I bitmap to list this thing, if I ask it to be turned into a list, that is going to equal 50, 84, 104. Right? So I'm going to get the list back out sorted, even though I put them in kind of in this shuffled order. So are we going to be able to get this thing to pass in time? Because I'm running out of time. So we're going to need some def2list method or function. It takes in a bitmap, and what we expect to get back from it is some sort of a list. So we're still failing, but we're a little bit closer. So one way we can think about this is like, you could think of this as a loop, right? So you could create a loop where each time you're saying look at the next bit and then shift this number back over one, like get rid of that bit that was the first bit previously and see what the next one is. And as long as we keep track of which bit we're looking at, then we can just check each one if it's 1 or 0. And if it was 1, then we assume that that number was there and we can add it to our list. But in Elixir and Erlang, there's no such thing as a loop. Instead, what you use is recursion. So what we're going to do here is say, we're going to call another version of our toList function here and say bitmap, and we're going to start at bit number 0, and we're going to start with an empty list. toList. And whenever you're doing recursion, the first thing you want to think of is what's your stopping condition. So the stopping condition is if we've ever shifted our bitmap so far over that it's 0, there's no ones left in the bitmap, then we can stop looking, right? So if that happens, then we don't care which bit I'm currently on, but we should have some sort of a list, and what we're going to do then is just return that list. That will have been the full list of our numbers. And if we haven't gotten to 0 yet, then what we have left is some sort of bitmap, some bit number that we're currently looking at, and our list so far. And if this is the case, then what we're going to do is take we're going to do a little conditional thing here and say if bitmap and 1. So I'm just going to check the first bit. I'm going to like mask it against just the number 1. And if what I get back out of that is a 1, meaning that number was in my bitmap, then I'm going to say which bit. So if I was looking at bit number 4, that's the which bit number that I'm carrying around with me. I'm going to take that and add it to my list. And I'm using this as like this is a way that you can append something to a list. And what I'm going to end up doing with that new list is passing it back into myself again. And so then I'm going to take bitmap, shift it over by 1, and say now you're looking at the next bit, which bit plus 1, in this new list. And if it was 0, then I call myself and say I still have to bump over the bit. I'm still looking at the next bit, but I just pass the list through without modifying it. And we're all about to find out that I'm terrible at Elixir. Oh, I knew it! I knew this one wouldn't work.
Terrible.
Oh, I already added my own end. Oh, such a fail. Unexpected token end. It's getting better. Oh, the do's. Hey, not too bad, but I returned the wrong thing. So let's see. One thing I definitely need to do here.
You can switch your list in which bit, I think.
Which one? So I get the bitmap, which bit, and then my list is always the third one.
I think you need to switch around the way they're appended in the brackets. So like list should go first before which bit.
I'm actually just gonna have to reverse it at the end because you can only append one way. They're a singly linked list is the way they're implemented. So I know I'm gonna end up having to do a list reverse here at the end. So let's see, where am I going wrong? So I'm getting as my final list this like list of characters instead of a list of numbers.
I'm probably way off, but I noticed that most of your to-do or to lists and then the parentheses don't have spaces, but your one does. Up by your third one up there.
This one?
No, the next one.
The next one down? This
Next
one?
up. So two list bitmap, like there's a space between two lists. I don't know if that matters.
Shouldn't be an issue.
It shouldn't. Yeah, that shouldn't matter.
You're talking about your method.
Okay.
Let's see. So I'm trying to pass in my bitmap.
Oh, you're talking about between the. Okay, good. I still don't think that'd be an issue.
It's
though.
not an issue.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Turn your line numbers on, just kidding.
Sorry. Vim enthusiasts are hating on me already.
So like on line 18, like that's what he was talking about.
Two list space. I don't think that's it.
Okay. Bitmap, which bit, and a list. And I'm appending to the list. All right. We have failed. So I'm going to be a total cheater and just go back over to, oh, it's actually, what? Oh, I totally removed the wrong copy of bitmap. I removed the one that's on, luckily it's on GitHub. Woo! I totally just removed my own project. This is not a good idea, by the way. All right, so now I'm gonna go to code. All right, so this was the real copy of bitmap that I had. I didn't delete it. All right, feeling better. All right, so the way I ended up doing it, we won't get into all the details here, but eventually what I found out is that you can only shift so many bits before Erlang is like, no, seriously, that is not a number anymore. The number turns out to be higher than I thought. It's actually like, it's more than 32,000 bits that you can have in a single number before Erlang starts yelling at you. But if you wanted to store like 9-digit numbers, for instance, then it doesn't store all of those. And so I ended up chunking up, like creating a hash or a map and putting a number in each bucket of the map. And then I take my number in and figure out, oh, that number should be in bucket number 16. And then there's a number inside of there that I put my bit in. So like one level deeper. And it ends up looking like this. and eventually your test pass once you figure out what you've done wrong. But anyway, so that's just a quick walkthrough of Elixir. I think it's a pretty fun language. And so with that, we will move on now to, do you want to go next?
I'm fine with that. I also had a question.
Yes, question.
What was that like window manager you used when you brought up a terminal over on the side? And it like said something.
Oh,
It was like all gray windows. Yeah, that. What is that? It's just like.
so this is just iTerm 2. If you just use its built-in panes and tabs.
Okay, I guess I must have just turned off those like things at the top. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I
they
did that all
only
the time. It
stay
just,
there.
Looked like almost like X. It looked like something in like some really minimal like.
Yeah.
Linux or something.
And I think iTerm 2 uses tmux under the hood to do that, but I've never messed much with it. I just
Yeah, I actually use those. I just don't have the gear there or like the close button. So I think I probably just turned those off in the preferences and therefore never saw it.
yeah, something like that. All right. In that case, Isaac, you're up.
Okay. Yeah, it looks sort of coolish.
So Elixir's another programming language.
Yeah. Basically, all of the Ruby users group tonight is other programming languages.
Except for this one.
Except for I'm.
That's right.
You did
Right,
that whole
so-
thing in Vim.
Yeah, that was just Vim.
Well, he was just. I don't know.
Yeah, yes. And so if anyone else is thinking of ideas of like, oh, I remember a cool thing I saw at this one place.
So, what do you
Okay,
use
guys,
Elixir for, anyways?
Is this
In
seeable?
The main thing you would use Elixir or Erlang for is if you have a lot of concurrency concerns in your
Oh, okay.
application, like if you have a whole bunch of connections and you're trying
Whatever.
to manage the complexity of dealing with all the race conditions of those connections.
Okay.
Since Elixir has no shared mutable state, it's impossible to do in the language. Like the runtime won't allow you to do that. The only way one process can talk to another is by sending it a copy of the data. And because of that, it helps to avoid a lot of race condition stuff
Right.
that you get into if you were doing the same sort of threaded stuff in like Java or JRuby. So,
Okay.
Nice.
Erlang is a functional language.
Right, kind of like Passport.
Right, and it was created for telecoms in the 80s.
Uh,
So there's a really terrific video called the Erlang Movie. Just
That'd be your Erlang movie
Google
for
search
food.
it.
Both of them are amazing.
Nice.
Google search Erlang
Community
Movie,
made.
and it's like 11 minutes long, and you'll get about 8 minutes in, and your head will explode. You're like, what? It's like so terrible up until that 8th minute.
It really sets your expectations low, and then they do a cool trick that you're like, that's possible? I've never seen that ever.
Nice. So yeah, my iTerm looks like this without those things on top, and that's why I was confused. Yeah, but so anyway, so first I want to show something. So if you look at this pane over here, you'll see that. So basically, you could just do like a locate to basically figure out like with the current gems you have installed, like where the templates are being stored, like for what you would want to overwrite. But like, so this is like how Slim Rails does it. I use Slim for basically everything. So like I care more about their templates. But you'll notice that they're stored like in their gem. They're stored under Slim, Scaffold, templates, and then they have all these files. If you look in Rails, under like ERB, they have like ERB, Scaffold. Here, let me just do path to working directory really fast. So you'll notice that like ERB scaffold templates rather than Slim scaffold templates. So the interesting thing is that when you want to overwrite those, you can't actually use the same folder structure, which I don't know, was when I first was trying to do that a few years ago, it was pretty confusing. But so if you look at so if you go down to lib templates, so what it's actually doing is like instead of putting the templates under templates, it puts templates as the root directory, and then the rest of the file structure is the same for some reason, but it's like templates is in the beginning, and then it would go Slim Scaffold whatever your templates are, rather than Slim Scaffold templates whatever your templates are. So I mean, and that goes for ERB too. So I mean, pretty much anything that you wanted to overwrite, you could just throw into here and then go edit it. So like say in here before you did this, you wanted to I don't know, you could put like a div and say class main content or something that like, I don't know, that sounds like something designers would want to do.
And then the main content would be part of your nav bar.
Yeah. Exactly. You know. So like now I have that. Let me open up my gem file and remove Slim so I can actually demonstrate this one. Okay, so now I could do like Rails G scaffold. I don't know. What's a good name? urug. Title string. So now it should generate those in UZRB. Looks good enough. So then if I go back here and should be able to say urug, I guess that was form. Throw that into there. You'll notice that that actually does have my div class main content. So, I mean, as you can see, I mean, the main complaints against scaffolding is you have to modify it so much in the first place. But I mean, if you do have a site, and if it's designed well, then most forms probably, hopefully, should look the same from page to page. And so, I mean, this really can save you a lot of time on the right projects. So, I mean, yeah, it's the same thing with Slim. I mean, I could go over here, only, you know, it's in Slim, and I could do the same thing and say, like, dot content. Or, I guess that would be main content. And, yeah, I could go back into my gem file. And bundle install. And then Rails G urug 2 string, and that did Slim, so cool. Urug 2 index. No, urug 2 form, and same thing. So one other thing about this that is actually really important to note is, so if you look in your application RB, this is a default scaffold generator. This is a default scaffold generator that Rails uses. Devise recently, and by recently I mean like about like 10 months ago, included a gem called the Responders gem. The Responders gem actually has its own scaffolding and its own scaffolding controller. The scaffolding controller, unfortunately, is broken. So if you ever generate scaffolding and you're planning on using Devise, you need to actually add this line right here, and this will tell Rails, actually, no, use the default scaffolding generator rather than the one this gem is telling you to use. And when I say it's broken, I mean that if you use namespacing for any of your controllers or models or anything else, it will get like half of them right and half of them wrong. It will call it one thing in the controller and a different thing in the view. And so if you're not using any namespacing, Responders gem scaffolding will actually work, but still be weird. So this is kind of important to remember. Another thing that's interesting is when you're using multiple gems that if you're using multiple gems that actually are overriding templates, the last one to be loaded will actually be the one that takes precedence, which kind of makes sense, but it's still kind of an important thing to remember. For instance, just kind of, I don't know, for instance, like in my Petergate gem that I think is pretty awesome. But inside of there, I'm actually overriding the scaffold controller to include just like one line, just like the access setting line at the top of the controllers. And that one, pretty much like if you're loading devise, you could just include that one after and it will actually work, because that's just using the regular Rails one with the one thing on top of the controller. And it's called the same thing as the Rails one too. So that will actually make devise work without having to add that line in the application controller. Or application RB. And yeah, that's pretty much, I mean, you could do the same thing with CSS, you can do the same thing with the controllers and pretty much any generators. Just like look where they're at, find the templates folder, put them in your templates folder and lib, and remove the templates folder from around the files, and they'll work. So yeah, that's pretty much that.
Nice.
Thanks.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Again, new to Ruby. But how come you do 2% signs in ERB tags?
The reason those are there is because these are actually generators for ERB files. So yeah, it's pretty much rendering the inside ones as basically it's actually rendering what it sees inside. So like the extra % is what it needs to render, not actually what it is.
Cool.
It pretty much is like it's the same as, like, for instance, putting single quotes instead of double quotes.
Oh, gotcha.
Like, it's in a way escaping them and saying, like, don't render these ERB tags, instead write them to the page. Or don't evaluate them, render them.
Gotcha.
So yeah, for sure.
Sweet. Then next up, perhaps last up, Mike.
Anybody else want to go?
You're trying hard.
No, that's the problem, is I'm not trying hard at all.
It's not like you did 2 conference talks in a conference recently or something.
2 conferences and a talk.
Which conferences were these?
The Mountain West. But yeah,
Speaking of Ruby on Rails.
I might actually be a little burnt out. All right. Wow, that is huge. Is that possibly too big?
Never too big.
I did 720p and it was fine.
Yeah, I'm just gonna see if I can do like high DPI. I don't think it will let me. All right. Yeah, go away. This is called Divi, and Divi is just resizes your windows for you, so it's kind of nice. All right, so I'm going to talk about D. D is so Safari. Go away. So this is D. D is a language. It's actually an old language. It's been around for a very long time, more than 10 years. Probably, I think, close to 15 or I don't know, 20. I think it was late 90s. Seems like late 90s, early 2000s is when I first heard about it. And what they said is they wanted it to be like the next evolution of C++ and fix a lot of the problems that C++ has. So if you don't like C++, which you shouldn't, then you will probably find something that you like in D. So the thing I want, I don't know, I have no plan for it, so I'm just going to step through it. Who here is familiar with C? Who has written C before? So about half. All right, so the other half, I'm assuming you were familiar with Ruby. So this is the side that knows C. This is the side that doesn't. So Ruby owes a lot of its heritage to a lot of languages. One of them is actually C. And it's implemented in C, and so that certainly has affected them. There's a lot of problems with C, there is even more problems with C++. D is an attempt to get a language that is actually compatible, can interop with C, not with C++, but also fixes a lot of the problems that C++ has and C has. The most notable of them is memory vulnerabilities and stuff. So, do you guys remember like the Toyota thing a couple years ago when they would just like accelerate and kill people?
Yeah. Yep.
So what happened there is that the software that the Toyota was running would accidentally read memory that it was using for other things. And that memory that they were reading was being used to control the speed of the car. And so it would just hit some other piece of memory somewhere, decide that it needed to go 100 miles an hour and kill people. So memory management is in a very complex and difficult problem that's made even worse when you have to do it manually, which is basically what you have to do in all C-based languages. So D is an attempt to get out of that. So anyways, we're going to start incredibly simple. So we're just going to write hello world, right? And then we're going to watch this fail. So the compiler is DMD. There's actually two compilers. I'd stick with DMD. You can brew install DMD, or I think maybe dlang. I think it's DMD. And get it. So we'll just say hello.d, and right off the bat, does anybody want to make a bet as to if this will work or not?
You said it wouldn't, so I'm saying no.
Okay, so it's not going to work. And it gives us a couple of nice errors, saying it found a curly brace when it was expecting a semicolon. So let's take a look, and because it's really based on this heritage of C, we need to have semicolons at the end of the lines. Ruby, you can get away with it, and most Ruby does get away with it. Even JavaScript, for the most part, you can get away with the statement ending semicolon, but in D, we cannot. So to appease like the syntactical thing, we have to add that. Let's go ahead and run it again. Now it's saying undefined identifier right. And that's because we're using this function right. Now, unlike Ruby, where if you have code that's available within like the runtime of the system, you can use it whenever you want. With D, we have to actually say what we want loaded per file. Okay.
Does it like include standard library or something?
Yeah. So we're going to say standard. We're going to include the standard I/O. Okay. And we can even be a little bit anal if standard I/O is a lot. We're going to say we want to include the standard I/O package, but we really only care about the write function or functionality. So let's run that again. Now it did something. It compiled, but it didn't really run it. So let's tell it to run and compile. All right. So now it says hello world. So what this is doing with the -run is it's going to compile it, and then it's actually going to run it. Now, it's messing up with my prompt there, which I don't like that. So I'm going to tell it to, instead of write, I want to write line. But that's going to add that line break at the end. Okay, run it again. Write line's not there. So I'm just going to go, and I'm not going to be as specific. I'm just going to import all of standard I/O. That's going to make the executable larger because there's going to be more code, but I think we're going to be all right. All right, so there we go. We can run hello world. It's not as difficult to run hello world. It's not like a lot of other languages where you have to do a lot more than this. All right. Let's see how fast it runs. So let's add a time to the beginning of it, right? So it takes almost a half of a second to run hello world. Let's add a new file. and we'll make this a Ruby file. And who wants to bet if who wants to bet that Ruby is faster or slower than D? You think it's going to be faster? Who thinks it's,
Ruby 2 point, probably.
this is Ruby 2.2. So you think Ruby's going to be faster? All right. So in fact, Ruby is considerably faster because it's not doing the compiling first. So let's go back, and we're just going to compile hello.d, okay? And now when we list out, we've got this new hello file, right? And it's flagged as an executable, so our compiler has done the right thing for us. So let's see if it's faster. So it's 0.011, and then again Ruby is, so it's about 8 times faster. So this is proof positive that D is a much faster language, and you should write all of your code in D.
Ruby's dead.
Ruby's dead. I've proved it. Look at the size. I mean, it's 600K, right? Because it's doing quite a lot in there. We can try and get that down. So let's only include write line, and then compile it again and see what we get. And it really doesn't go down at all. So D is actually pretty smart about what it will include, what it will not include. All right, so that's that. We need to make this just a little bit better. So let's have our program ask you questions. So we're going to say write line. It's so hard with parentheses. What is your name? Okay. And then, excuse me, I want to say name equals read line. Okay. And then I will write line again, and we will say hello, and then name. Okay.
Does read line include the carriage return?
It does. Watch. All right. So, all right. Oh no! It's an error.
That's a really helpful error message, though.
What do we do? Undefined identifier name. Did you mean function rename? No, I did not. I actually meant name. So, one of the problems with C is that C is actually very loosely typed. And so D has a very strongly typed language. And so we could just say string and get name, right? So if we run this and I say Mike, and it says hello Mike, we'll get to that new line at the end of that. Or we could say const, right? And then run it again. This tells us that we're not really intending on changing this value, but it doesn't tell us what the type is. It's actually going to infer it. It's the same thing as basically saying this, although this gives us mutability as well. So my name is Raul. If you do not want to write your very verbose type on an annotation about what you're doing, you can just say auto and D will figure it out for you. Okay. Again, if you do a lot of JavaScript, consider that your var. Okay. So here now we've seen that we're doing like a string concatenation within the write line just by giving it multiple arguments. But when I say my name is Raul, I have this extra new line here. So what I would really love to do is called chomp on that. Chomp is a function that will remove the very last character of a string. It's very common. Let's run that. Now there's no chomp for string. Why is that? let's do, let's just import string so we can get all of our string functions as well. Rerun that. And now I don't have that extra new line. Okay, so we got chomp, and that's very cool. Let's get a little bit more information. What is your age? Okay, and I'm going to say that my age is going to be read line and chomp. All right. And then here I want to do a little bit different. So if age is less than 40, I think that'll work. So if I'm just going to say old man. Old man name. Okay. Makes sense. All right. So, will this work? Who sees something wrong with this? Nobody? Everyone's...
How does it know that age is a number? You just chomped it. So it's
Yeah,
still
so let's run it. Yeah, okay. Incompatible types, age less than 40. So here's what's happening. D says, oh, I have this auto age. We're getting it from somewhere. But I'm treating it like an integer by checking if it's less than. But I know that when we're calling readline, we're getting a string, and we're calling chomp, we're getting a string. So how do we do that? So yeah, let's do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to call toBangInt. Now, this is using something called templates. And again, if you're familiar with C++, templates, or in Java land or .NET land, generics is a comparable type of technology. So what we're going to do is we just want to compile that to an int. And hopefully that does it for us. There is no property 2. We need to add it. So I believe that is conversion. Nice. Okay. So my name is Mike, and I am 41 years old, and it properly says, oh, look at you. You're old. You don't get a hello. But if I run it again, and I say, I'm Michael Rees, and I'm like 31. How old are you?
31 this year, yeah.
He's 30, you jerk. So it says hello to Michael, but not to Mike, because I'm old. All right, now what happens if you put in something like, my name is Mike, and my age is none of your business.
Give me 0.
Right? Ah! Right?
Run quickness.
Yeah. All right. So what can we do for that? We're going to put this in a try. And if honestly, you guys should be getting like I don't know, like nostalgic by looking at this.
I am.
You do the heebie-jeebies, really.
All right. So. All right. So here we're just gonna say, don't be a jerk.
Should go with jerk.
I think Gerald.
Don't be a jerk. Semicolon. All right, let's run that again. My name is Mike, and I am, you are stupid. And then it says don't be a jerk. Okay, there you go. So this is like a real quick rundown of writing in D. The things that I want to call out is that we've got the strong typing. Ruby's actually got very strong typing. It's just got dynamic dispatch, and it doesn't really do any type checks, but it's still strongly typed. So there's a difference between having a strongly typed language and having the type checks. D is a strongly typed language like Ruby, but it does the type check at compile time, which is a very handy thing to do. It has the auto recognition of types. It does a lot of work for you, so you don't have to do it. And it's got quite a hefty standard library.
It's like quite a bit more object oriented. I mean, like all those libraries are added, they're actually adding methods onto the objects you already have rather than being methods.
Yeah, and so the thing I love about Ruby is that most of the stuff I do is not systems level programming, which is really the types of programming that these type of languages are encouraging. I do lots of modeling. I do lots of like real world modeling and logical modeling, trying to get a system that's understood or understandable that people can make changes to and affect an outcome that they want to see. So let's take a look at that. I'm not gonna spend too much time on this, but they do have classes. So we can say a string name and then an int age, right? And then you can even say this name and then, oh wait, hold on, let me check. Oh yeah, that's what I was looking for. This dot name equals name.
And you need R in your string, I think, maybe.
Oops, yeah, you're right.
That should be a type.
Sting, yeah.
I want to sleep right now.
All right, so let's do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to say auto person equals new person. And we're just going to read in from readline for our name, right? And then we're going to say person.age equals that. And then when we write out, we're going to say hello person.name. You are person.age. I'm going to leave it there. So let's see if it runs. Undefined identifier age.
Oh, you need person.age in your if statement.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Thank you. Okay, let's see if that runs. Identifier name. Oh. See, I didn't do this on my sample code. All right, so my name is Mike. I am 39 because I want the first one. And so there you go. So even though D as a language is really geared more towards systems programming, without all of the problems of C++, it still gives you lots and lots of object orientation constructs. And it's actually, there's a couple of weird things like, creating the constructor kind of looks a little odd if you're not used to it. But I think that's not that far off from things that I like about Ruby.
Yeah, no, it's a fairly cool language.
Mm-hmm. It's a very cool language. It's a very cool standard library. It's a very small community. But there's an awful lot to really like about it. And then when you get into things like parallelism, concurrency, there's also lots of really interesting things in D as well. So by and large, I like most of the decisions that the designers have made in D, whereas in C++ and C, not so much. So anyways, that's it. Any questions?
C++ is like so fragmented across compilers and operating systems and everything too.
Yeah, the new spec. The problem with C++ is that you really have to pick a subset of the language that you're going to use, and every project uses a different subset. But I think there are lots of wonderful things in the latest 2 releases of C++, if you choose the right subset. But, again, mostly what you're doing is you're integrating with older libraries, and so there's lots of pain there. But check out D. Any questions?
Yeah. Are there any other compiled languages that like you actually find to be
Yeah, I'm not big on Go. Like Michael, you were in Go for a bit, right?
I've only played around toying, not really, never made a real full system there.
I like Elixir. I like Erlang, but again, you're kind of tied to that runtime. What's nice about this is it's just compiled, executable.
I was
that you
wondering,
can
has
run.
anyone here played with Rust?
Yes.
I know that's another thing that people really love for systems programming
Hmm.
and tries to solve some of the same problems in very different ways, I think. But
Hmm. Yeah, I think Rust is also very interesting. There's what was the one? I forget. I think there's lots of languages that they're all good. All languages are good. No languages are bad, with the exception of C++.
Yeah.
I'll challenge you on that. But
And Java. Pretty sure Java is at least as good as C++ probably.
Yeah, I
I
don't know.
think C++ is only as good as your team and the subs that you pick.
Well,
If you
yes.
pick that correctly, beautiful things can happen.
Yes, absolutely, 100% absolutely agree. The problem is that you very, very rarely see that.
If you want to see it, come work here, everybody.
I also think that what was really interesting I saw was earlier this week that Microsoft's .NET framework is now open source,
Yeah.
and now they've got a project replacing their internal JIT with LLVM, and that's the first step to actually doing ahead of time compilation. And C Sharp is actually a really good language. There's not a lot that is bad in C Sharp, and so that might actually kind of give that language additional life outside of the Windows world. But there's a lot in JavaScript that is borrowing directly from C Sharp. That's how influential C Sharp has been. So C Sharp might be worth an additional look if you haven't looked at it for a really long time, because there's some really interesting kind of changes happening in that world with that language because of everything being open source recently.
I kind of liked it like 10 years ago in college, but it was just like I couldn't really use it except for on Windows, and then even then I had to like buy more than the student version of like the .NET framework and all that.
So they just released like a brand new version of Visual Studio, free version. They're giving so much away for free now,
Yeah,
and
so
the whole runtime is now open source on GitHub too.
Mhm.
Yeah, it really does change.
Yeah, and their intention is to have that runtime on every major platform. So it'll be on Mac. I mean, they had Mono on it before, but they bought basically Mono, right? And Miguel de Gaiza, I'm not sure how you say his name, but he's like a big muckety-muck at Microsoft now. So they've really bought a lot of Microsoft tech, and they're making good use of it.
Maybe like it'll get to the point where there'll be like enough professional C# programmers that they'll like learn how to remove ASP from the end of like all their pages.
Yeah, there's a lot there that is bad with web programming for sure. Because I left .NET for Ruby 10 years ago, so that was kind of the world I was in before.
I did .NET and then 3 years of Java and then Ruby for the last like 7 years. So yeah.
all right. Well, does anyone have any like quick little lightning talks or just a quick cool code thing you want to show off? Final call.
I had a question.
Yeah.
So I had an idea to make a web app based off this problem that I keep seeing with my house, I guess, with grocery shopping. So anytime my wife, we run out of something or we use something, we never write it down or anything like that. Then my wife goes shopping and it comes back and is like, oh, I forgot to buy such and such. So I was thinking about making this app where anytime we use something or throw something away, we can scan the barcode and then that would go to an actual list of what to buy. Would I need Would I need to get the API from something? Like, I was just trying to like map it out in my head one day. I didn't
Yeah,
know.
I mean, so if you were interested in being able to scan the barcode and turn that into some sort of a product name, if you want to just take a picture of it, there's a good library out there called Zebra. And that one is really good at just recognizing QR codes and barcodes and things like that. And it'll basically extract out like a number. But what you're going to get out of that barcode is some sort of like product number. And that's going to correlate back in some database. That number is tied to a product name and a description or whatever. And so you'd have to find either an existing API for which barcode numbers correlate to what products. And I'm not sure how unique that space is. Like maybe just because my company decided that product number 84,000,075 was our product. I don't know if that means no one else ever used that same number. I've never dived into that world.
There is actually lots of duplication on barcodes. They try and keep them out of different like segments. Like if it's in a grocery store, then they'll have to coordinate what barcodes they'll use. But it's not uncommon for people to duplicate it.
So like maybe the barcode on your like your concert ticket might collide with something from a grocery store, but those are far enough apart that they don't worry too much or something.
Right, or like there'll be a space for so like the in-house brand of bread may have one barcode, but in a different store that same barcode will be a gallon of milk.
Gotcha. So that would, I don't know if there's APIs out there for that or what, but I would look for it.
One thing I did a few years ago is like actually the Amazon API. You can just send it the barcode numbers, and it'll actually tell you the product, and you can just easily like scrape that page, or you can get it to even just return like JSON or XML of like that product, and it's still like their listing of that product, but that's still pretty useful as far as coming up with like the title and description, like what that item is.
Yeah.
And that's actually something you can use for free.
Yeah. So yeah, I would check out Zebra. I'm pretty sure Zebra is a Java library, but you could easily wrap it with JRuby. I'm sure there's a C extension based one for MRI as well. And
What are you planning on scanning the barcode with?
Your phone. Like you know how you have your scanner. You can like scan those square
I know
thingies.
Zebra works on Android.
yeah.
So
Yeah, and the only thing I don't know is that normally the way that the built-in apps that have scanners on them, usually they look inside of that encoded message to see if there's something like a URL, and it'll say, "Oh, I can open up that URL in your browser." If you want to go the other way and like launch the scanner app from your app and then have it come back, I know there's a way to do it, but it's a little more complicated, and I know it's different on Apple versus Android. And so if you could get away with just like an image upload on a page and a way to have your phone just say, take a picture and put that in that file upload, I would try to detect it on the back end just so you have the minimal number of things different per
like
platform.
Having to open like your barcode scanner and then do something with it, like there's a reason like QR codes have basically just completely fallen off the face of the earth, because as cool as they were, like they never implemented it into the camera of any like mobile devices, so like it just wasn't worth it or very easy to use.
Cool.
Cool. So
Are-
I'll go a different route. Excellent. Thanks, guys.
Amazon
Sure.
has those buttons now. You can put
I
in all
know,
your products and
stupid
just push
Amazon.
those.
Amazon takes all of our good ideas.
can't see that being very useful with children.
That's why they released the Echo,
want
because
more
now they
soap,
can
soap,
listen to all of our good
soap, soap.
ideas and
It
then
doesn't-
steal them.
It doesn't send new. It doesn't send like new stuff until you get the other order. So if you push it once, it'll
Well, I
go
think it sends stuff to your phone too, so you're like, I don't really want that order.
probably.
But still, I just see my kid pushing that button a lot. It's like 3.5. This
More
button
Cheetos.
clicks.
More fruit snacks.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone for coming. I think plans are still a little bit fuzzy, but there's a VC firm. I was mentioning this to a few people earlier. There's a VC firm in the area that is interested in paying to host one of the URUG meetups, and it would be very entrepreneurial based. They're looking for engineers that want to create a startup or want to be involved in a startup, and trying to back those ideas. And so they're just trying to reach out to development communities more. So we might have kind of an entrepreneurial, I don't know how to say that word,
It's alright. We understand what
startup related things. If you're into any of that, if you have startup ideas, please shoot me an email on the list or on the Slack, URUG Slack channel. If you have other ideas of just presentations you'd like to see or presentations you'd like to give, also just go throw those in the meetup channel on our Slack or shoot an email on the email list, because I'm always curious to see what things you guys are into. So mostly just thanks. We'll have a few minutes to kind of mingle around. Everyone can try to hit up Neil and offer him a job. I'm sure that'll probably be like 8 people. But mostly just thanks for coming, and we'll see you guys next month.
Sweet. When are you guys moving to Thanksgiving?
June 1st.